The last hour of belonging the office holiday party ended 3 hours ago. Paper plates bearing half-eaten cookies still littered the break room. Tinsels sagged from cubicle walls. Somewhere on the 4th floor, a Bluetooth speaker continued playing Silent Night on repeat, forgotten by whoever had brought it. Rachel Bennett sat alone in conference room C, watching her reflection fragment across the glass walls that separated her from the rest of the office. Her hands rested flat on the polished table, fingers spread wide as though anchoring herself to something solid. Across from her, Patricia Grayson from Human Resources maintained perfect posture, her tablet glowing with documents Rachel would never see in full. To Patricia's left sat David Cramden, senior board member, checking his watch for the 3rd time in 5 minutes. "We appreciate your years of service," Patricia said, her voice carrying the warmth of a recorded message. "This decision reflects organizational priorities moving forward." Rachel heard the words but felt them land somewhere distant. 5 years, 1,826 days of arriving early, staying late, covering shifts when colleagues called in sick, volunteering for projects nobody wanted. 5 years of believing effort mattered. "Is there severance?" Rachel asked quietly. Patricia glanced at her tablet. 2 weeks, as outlined in your initial contract. 2 weeks, 14 days to replace 5 years. Rachel calculated quickly. Rent, utilities, her mother's medications, groceries. The numbers dissolved into impossibility. "Can I work through the holidays?" Rachel tried again. "Just until January." David Cramden spoke for the first time. "Company policy requires immediate transition. We need your badge, and building access returned today." Today, December 24th. Christmas Eve. Rachel thought about the conversation she'd had with her mother that morning. Helen Bennett had tried to sound cheerful about their modest holiday plans, but Rachel heard the exhaustion beneath her words. 3 months earlier, her mother's rheumatoid arthritis had worsened, forcing early retirement from teaching. Now Rachel was the only income, or rather, had been. "I understand," Rachel said, because what else could she say? Patricia slid a thin folder across the table. "Sign here, here, and here." Rachel signed. Her signature looked unfamiliar, shaky. The invisible witness 3 weeks earlier. Rachel had been hurrying toward the elevator banks, arms full of binders for a morning presentation. The elevator doors were closing when she noticed a man struggling with a stack of file folders. A coffee balanced precariously on top. He wore no badge. His coat looked worn, his shoes scuffed. Rachel didn't think. She simply moved. She lunged forward, slapping the door sensor. The doors jerked open. "Thank you," the man said, genuine surprise in his voice. "No problem." Rachel smiled, stepping back to let him enter first. "Looks like you've got your hands full." "You have no idea," he said, a hint of amusement in his tone. They rode up together, in comfortable silence. When his folders started sliding, Rachel caught them without comment, and handed them back. At the 7th floor, the man's access card failed at the security pad. He fumbled with it, embarrassed. "Here," Rachel said, scanning her own badge. "Sometimes these things are temperamental." "I really appreciate this," he told her. Rachel shrugged. "Everyone needs help sometimes. Have a good day." She never asked his name, never asked what department he worked in. She just helped and moved on. The way she'd been raised to do. That man was Michael Thornton, CEO. The person who owned the building, who signed executive directives, who had recently returned from a board summit increasingly concerned about company culture reports that didn't match the polished presentations he received quarterly. Michael had decided to see for himself. No announcement, no fanfare. He'd borrowed a temporary badge from facilities, dressed down, and spent 3 weeks observing how people treated each other when they thought nobody important was watching. He'd seen efficiency. He'd seen ambition. He'd seen people walk past problems because solving them offered no credit. He'd seen managers ignore struggling employees because compassion wasn't measured in quarterly reviews. And then he'd seen Rachel, not once, but repeatedly, holding doors, helping confused interns find conference rooms, staying late to help a colleague finish a presentation, small acts, invisible to anyone tracking metrics. The weight of a cardboard box. Rachel walked through the office, carrying everything that had made her space personal. A coffee mug with a faded company logo her mother had given her after her first week. A small succulent plant Jennifer Jo from accounting had left on her desk with a note saying, "Thanks for always listening." A framed photo of her and her mother at her college graduation. The box wasn't heavy, but Rachel's arms trembled. She paused near the elevator, studying the lobby Christmas tree. Silver and gold ornaments caught the overhead lights. A few employees milled about, preparing to leave early for the holiday. Nobody looked at her. Nobody knew, heading out early. Someone asked cheerfully, "Passing by?" Rachel forced a smile. Something like that. The elevator descended. Rachel watched the numbers drop, each floor taking her further from everything she'd built. When the doors opened to the lobby, cold air rushed in from the revolving entrance. She stepped out into the December evening. Snow fell steadily, blanketing the city in white silence. Rachel pulled her coat tighter and walked toward the parking garage, her breath visible in small clouds. Her car was on the third level, wedged between a pickup truck and a sedan. Already dusted with snow, she set the box on the passenger seat and sat behind the wheel without starting the engine. The silence pressed against her ears. Her phone buzzed. A text from her mother. "Don't forget we need milk. Drive safe, sweetheart." "It's snowing hard," Rachel typed back with numb fingers. "I'll be home soon." She didn't mention the box. Didn't mention the meeting. Didn't mention that tomorrow morning she had nowhere to go. The watcher in the tower high above the city streets. Michael Thornton stood at his office window. The building was nearly empty. Most executives had already left for holiday travel, family dinners, ski trips. He stayed. On his desk lay a thin file, Rachel Bennett, Operations Coordinator. 5 years. No disciplinary actions. Performance reviews consistently strong, reliable, invisible. He opened another file, then another. Termination decisions from the past quarter. Patterns emerged. Speed prioritized over judgment. Costs cut without considering consequences. People reduced to line items. Michael thought about the elevator. About Rachel's easy kindness. About how she'd treated him like a person, not an inconvenience. He thought about the company he'd built 20 years ago. About the values he'd written into the mission statement. About how far those words had drifted from reality. His phone buzzed. A text from David Cramden. "Bennett termination processed. Merry Christmas." Michael didn't respond. Instead, he opened his calendar and created a meeting request. Tomorrow morning. 9 o'clock. Executive floor. He typed Rachel's name carefully, then paused before hitting send. Outside his window, snow continued falling, covering the city in white. Somewhere below, Rachel Bennett drove home through the storm. Unaware that everything was about to change, Michael hit send. The test was over. The reckoning was about to begin. The morning after Rachel woke before dawn. Her body still conditioned to work rhythms her mind knew were broken. For 3 seconds, she forgot. Then memory crashed back. The conference room. Patricia's tablet. David Cramden, checking his watch. The cardboard box now sitting on her kitchen. Counter-like evidence of failure. She lay in bed listening to her mother move quietly in the kitchen. The familiar sounds of coffee brewing, cabinet doors opening and closing. Helen Bennett was trying to be quiet, trying not to wake her daughter. Unaware that Rachel hadn't really slept. The email had arrived at 11:47 the previous night. Rachel had been staring at her laptop, scrolling through job postings that all required skills she'd spent 5 years developing, but would now have to prove all over again to strangers. Subject. Meeting request. December 25th, 9 o'clock a.m. No explanation. No sender name she recognized. Just a calendar invitation for this morning, the executive floor. Conference room A, the same building where yesterday she'd been dismissed. Rachel read it 7 times, searching for meaning between the lines. Was it a mistake? A clerical error? Some final paperwork Patricia had forgotten? The thought of returning felt impossible, Humiliating. But the alternative, ignoring it, missing it, felt worse. At 7:30 she showered. At 8, she dressed in the same professional clothes she'd worn yesterday, pressing wrinkles from her coat with careful hands. At 8:15, her mother knocked softly on her bedroom door. "You're up early for Christmas morning," Helen said, leaning against the doorframe. Her hands were swollen today, joints inflamed despite medication. "I thought we'd have breakfast together." Rachel turned from the mirror. "I got called back to the office. Just for an hour. Some paperwork thing." The lie settled between them, uncomfortable but necessary. Helen studied her daughter's face with the practiced eye of someone who'd raised a child alone, who'd learned to read what wasn't spoken. "Okay," Helen said quietly. "Drive careful. Roads might still be slick." Rachel hugged her mother gently, mindful of painful joints. "I'll bring back pastries from that bakery you like." The return. The corporate tower looked different on Christmas morning. Empty parking lot. Dark windows on most floors. The revolving entrance doors moved slowly, reluctantly, as though the building itself was still sleeping. Rachel signed in at the security desk. The guard, someone she didn't recognize, checked her name against a list and nodded. Executive floor. Elevator on the right. Her badge still worked. She half expected it to be deactivated, to beep rejection, to force her to explain she'd been terminated yesterday. But the sensor glowed green, and the elevator doors opened smoothly. The ride up felt longer than ever. Rachel watched the numbers climb, each floor a layer of anxiety. Her reflection stared back from the polished metal doors, composed on the outside, fracturing within. The executive floor was a space she'd rarely entered. Thick carpets absorbed sound. Original artwork lined hallways. Everything smelled faintly of expensive coffee and furniture polish. The silence felt deliberate. Curated. Conference room, sat at the end of the corridor, its glass walls revealing figures already seated inside. Rachel recognized faces from yesterday. Patricia Grayson, David Cramden, others whose names she'd never learned. Her steps slowed. Her heart hammered against her ribs. Then she saw him. The man from the elevator. The one whose folders she'd caught, whose access card she'd fixed. But now he wore a tailored suit that probably cost more than her monthly rent. Now he stood at the head of the table with the unmistakable posture of someone who owned everything in sight. Rachel stopped walking. Realization flooded through her, cold and disorienting. Michael Thornton, CEO, the man she'd helped without knowing. The man who'd watched her treat him like an equal when he was anything but. "The question, please come in." "Rachel," Michael said, his voice carrying easily through the open door. Rachel forced her legs to move. She entered the conference room, hyper-aware of every eye tracking her movement. Patricia sat with perfect posture, tablet dark on the table before her. David Cramden wouldn't meet her gaze. Two other board members she vaguely recognized whispered to each other before falling silent. "Have a seat." Michael gestured to a chair near the middle of the table. Rachel sat. Her hands found her lap, fingers interlocking to stop them from trembling. Michael remained standing. "Yesterday," he began, his tone conversational, but carrying weight that silenced any potential interruption. "A decision was made regarding an employee. That decision was processed quickly, efficiently, with all proper documentation." He paused, letting the words settle. "I want to talk about that decision. But first, I want to establish something." His gaze swept the room before landing on Rachel. "Rachel, how long have you worked here?" 5 years, she answered, her voice steadier than she felt. "And in those 5 years, how many times would you say you've gone beyond your job description to help someone?" Rachel blinked, caught off guard. "I don't know. I just did what needed doing." "Interesting answer," Michael said. He began walking slowly around the table. 3 weeks ago, I decided to conduct an observation. No announcement, no executive protection, just me moving through this building as an ordinary person." Murmurs rippled through the board members. Patricia's eyes widened fractionally. "I wanted to understand something," Michael continued. "We talk constantly about culture. about values, about teamwork. I wanted to see if those words meant anything when nobody thought they were being evaluated. He stopped behind David Cramden's chair. I saw a lot. Efficiency, certainly. Ambition, absolutely. I also saw people walk past problems because solving them offered no credit. I saw managers ignore struggling colleagues because compassion doesn't appear on performance reviews. The room grew tense. Rachel sat perfectly still, unsure where this was leading. And then, Michael said, his voice softening slightly, I saw her. He gestured toward Rachel. I was carrying too many folders. People looked away. She stopped. She held the elevator. She caught my papers when they fell. She fixed my access card. He paused. She treated me like a human being. Rachel felt heat rise in her cheeks. This couldn't be why she'd been called here. One small kindness couldn't matter this much. So before we continue, Michael said, returning to the head of the table, his expression hardening, I need to ask all of you something. His eyes locked on each board member in turn. Do you know who she is? Silence answered him. Heavy, uncomfortable silence. David Cramden shifted in his seat. With respect, we processed a standard restructuring termination. These decisions happen regularly based on departmental. I didn't ask about process. Michael interrupted, his voice sharp now. I asked if you know who she is. More silence. You don't, Michael stated. You saw a name, a salary figure, a position that could be eliminated to improve quarterly projections. He placed both hands on the table, leaning forward. You never asked about character. You never considered what she brought beyond her job description. You never wondered if cutting her was cutting something this company desperately needs. Patricia finally spoke, her professional composure cracking slightly. We followed established guidelines for guidelines, Michael cut in, written by people who've forgotten why this company exists. He straightened. We don't exist to maximize efficiency. We exist to create value, and value requires people who care when they don't have to, who help when nobody's watching, who treat colleagues like human beings instead of obstacles. Rachel's throat tightened. She'd expected many things from this meeting, but not this. Rachel Bennett, Michael said, looking directly at her, was terminated for no reason except convenience. Meanwhile, managers who ignore problems, who create toxic environments, who prioritize personal advancement over team success, remain untouched because they hit targets. He turned back to the board. That ends today. The reversal. David Cramden stood abruptly. If I may, this seems like an overreaction to a single termination. We make these decisions constantly based on, sit down, Michael said quietly. The room froze. David sat effective immediately. Michael continued, Rachel Bennett's termination is revoked. He looked at Patricia. Process the paperwork, restore her access, issue a formal apology for the handling of this matter. Patricia nodded slowly, fingers already moving toward her tablet. Furthermore, Michael said, we will be conducting a comprehensive review of all terminations approved in the past 6 months. Every decision will be examined not just for process compliance, but for judgment, for necessity, for humanity. Board members exchanged glances, calculating implications. And finally, Michael added, his voice carrying unmistakable authority, Rachel will not be returning to her previous role. Rachel's heart sank. So, this was it, public theater before the real ending. She will be moving into a newly created position, Michael continued. Director of Internal Culture and Operations Integrity. This role reports directly to me. Her responsibility will be to question decisions, audit processes, ensure we don't sacrifice people for spreadsheets. The room erupted in whispered conversations. Rachel sat motionless, unable to process what she was hearing. Michael raised his hand. Silence returned. This isn't charity, he said, looking at Rachel again. This is recognition. You demonstrated something rare, character without audience. That's precisely what we need, examining our choices. He turned to the board one final time. This company was built on trust, on believing people matter. Somewhere, we lost that. Today, we start finding it again. He picked up a folder from the table. You're all dismissed. Except Rachel. Please stay. The board members filed out slowly, faces ranging from confused to concerned to carefully neutral. David Cramden was the last to leave, closing the door behind him with deliberate care. Alone with the CEO, Rachel finally found her voice. I don't understand. Michael sat down across from her, the authority dropping away to reveal something more genuine. You helped someone who couldn't advance your career, who couldn't offer you anything. You just helped because it was right. He paused. That quality is vanishingly rare. And when I saw you being erased yesterday, I realized we were about to lose the exact thing we claim to value. Rachel's eyes stung. She blinked hard. I don't know if I'm qualified for, neither do I, Michael admitted, but qualifications can be learned. Character can't. He slid a folder toward her. Take the day, read this. Think about it. If you want the position, we start Monday. Rachel opened the folder with shaking hands. Inside was a detailed role description, expectations, salary information that made her breath catch. Why me? She asked quietly. Michael stood, preparing to leave. Because yesterday, you were nearly invisible. Tomorrow, you'll make sure others aren't. He paused at the door. Merry Christmas, Rachel. After he left, Rachel sat alone in the conference room for a long time, watching snow begin to fall again outside the windows, holding a folder that proved yesterday's ending was actually a beginning. The first day of everything, Monday morning, arrived with cold sunshine and clear roads. Rachel stood outside the corporate tower at 8:45, watching employees stream through revolving doors. Same building, same entrance, everything familiar except her place in it. She wore a new badge, Director of Internal Culture and Operations Integrity. The title felt heavy around her neck, not with pride, but with responsibility she hadn't asked for and wasn't certain she deserved. Jennifer Jo from accounting spotted her near the entrance. Rachel, I heard you were back. Are you okay? Someone said you were let go, but then she stopped, noticing the new badge. Her eyes widened. Wait, what? It's complicated, Rachel said. I'll say, Jennifer breathed. That's an executive title. Rachel smiled weakly. I'm still figuring out what it means. Inside, conversations paused when she walked past. Heads turned. Whispers followed. The story had spread through the building like smoke. The woman fired on Christmas Eve. Called back. Promoted to a role nobody had heard of before. Rumors filled the gaps. She must be connected to someone powerful. She must have dirt on the board. She must have threatened legal action. None of them guessed the truth. She'd simply held an elevator door. The office of questions. Rachel's new office was on the executive floor. 3 doors from the CEO's suite. It was smaller than she'd imagined, but the window overlooked the city, and the desk was clean, waiting. A handwritten note lay centered on the surface. Take your time. Listen first. Don't let anyone rush you. Mount. She sat down slowly, running her fingers along the desk edge. Her old cubicle had been 6 floors down, surrounded by noise and motion. Here, silence wrapped around her like insulation. Her computer was already set up, email active. The inbox showed 47 unread messages. She opened the first, a calendar invitation for a departmental review meeting that afternoon. The second, a request for documentation about a recent termination. The third, a terse note from David Cramden asking to clarify her role boundaries. Rachel closed her eyes, breathing slowly. Then she opened a new document and began writing. Position purpose: to ensure company decisions reflect stated values. To ask questions others don't. To document patterns that harm people. Simple words. Terrifying implications. At 10 o'clock, Amanda Cross from Operations Management appeared at her door without knocking. Amanda was senior, respected, known for running tight departments that hit every metric. I wanted to introduce myself, Amanda said, though her smile didn't reach her eyes. I'm curious about your role. Rachel gestured to the visitor chair. I'm still defining it. Amanda sat, crossing her legs with practiced elegance. I'm sure you understand, there are established processes for handling personnel matters. chain of command, approval hierarchies. I do understand, Rachel said carefully. Good. Amanda's smile brightened artificially. Then you'll know that complications can slow important work. We pride ourselves on efficiency here. Rachel met her gaze steadily. We also pride ourselves on integrity. That's literally in my title. Amanda's smile froze. Of course. I just wanted to ensure we're aligned. She stood. Welcome aboard. After she left, Rachel wrote another note. First resistance arrived within 2 hours. Expected document everything. The meeting, that changed tone. The departmental review meeting began at 2 o'clock. 12 managers filled the conference room, laptops open, presentations queued. Rachel took a seat near the middle, not at the head, not in the corner, observing. The first 30 minutes followed familiar patterns, metrics displayed, targets discussed, efficiency gains celebrated, numbers climbed across screens, percentages proved success, everything quantified, nothing questioned. Then Rachel raised her hand. The presenting manager, a man named Stuart Clemens, paused mid-sentence. Yes. You mentioned reducing headcount by 15% in processing, Rachel said. What happened to those 15 people? Stuart blinked. They were transitioned out. Where did they transition to? I'm sorry. Did they find other work? Rachel pressed gently. Did we help them? Or did we just erase them and move forward? Uncomfortable silence filled the room. Stuart glanced at his slides as though they might contain an answer. That's not typically part of this review. Maybe it should be, Rachel said. Stuart's jaw tightened. With respect, this meeting focuses on operational outcomes. Personnel transitions are handled by HR. According to I'm not questioning HR, Rachel interrupted calmly. I'm asking if we know what happened to people whose lives we changed. If we care. Another manager spoke up, a woman named Diane Porter. This feels outside the scope of my scope, Rachel said, keeping her voice level, is to ensure we're making decisions with full awareness of their human cost. So, I'm asking, what happened to those 15 people? No one answered. Because no one knew. They'd been numbers on a chart, problem solved, efficiency gained. Where they went after didn't appear in any presentation. Rachel nodded slowly. Then let's find out. Before this meeting concludes, I'd like someone to pull their transition records. I want to know if they had severance, if they received job placement assistance, if anyone followed up after 30 days. Stuart's face reddened. That information exists in various systems. It would take time to compile. I have time, Rachel said simply. The meeting continued, but the energy had shifted. Presentations became shorter. Managers chose words more carefully. Numbers were still presented, but now accompanied by hesitation, by awareness that someone might ask about the people behind the percentages. The document of patterns that evening. Rachel stayed late. The building emptied floor by floor, lights turning off in waves. She remained at her desk, pulling files, reading termination summaries, cross-referencing dates with departmental performance reviews. Patterns emerged like constellations. Terminations spiked. Before quarterly earnings calls, appeals were denied within hours, not days. Exit interviews were brief, formulaic, filed away, unread. In the past year, 83 people had been let go. Of those, only 12 had received extended severance. Only 5 had been offered job placement assistance. 0 had been contacted for follow-up. Rachel created a spreadsheet. Names, dates, reasons given, outcomes when known. The document grew longer. The pattern grew clearer. At 9 o'clock, her phone rang. Michael Thornton's name appeared on screen. You're still there, he said, without greeting. How did you know? Building security alerts me when executive floor lights stay on past 8. Old habit. A pause. What are you finding? Rachel stared at her screen. A system that treats people as expendable. Document it, Michael said, carefully, completely. We'll need it for what? For what comes next. He hung up. Rachel returned to her spreadsheet, adding notes, flagging cases that seemed particularly unjust. One name caught her attention. Tom Rivera. Warehouse supervisor. 12 years of service. Terminated for missing a single performance target during a system outage that wasn't his fault. The termination had been approved in 17 minutes. Rachel opened a new email to HR. I need Tom Rivera's complete file, including the appeal he filed and why it was denied. She hit send and kept working. The confrontation by Wednesday, Rachel had compiled 40 pages of documentation. Termination patterns, appeal denials, exit interview summaries that revealed nothing, a system optimized for speed, not justice. She requested a meeting with the senior leadership team. Michael approved it immediately. Thursday morning, the conference room filled with executives Rachel had only seen from a distance. Vice presidents of operations, finance, human resources, people who made decisions that rippled through hundreds of lives. Rachel stood at the presentation screen. Her 40 pages projected for all to see. I've been asked to examine our culture, she began. This is what I've found. She walked them through the patterns. The speed of decisions. The lack of follow-up. The correlation between termination spikes and financial reporting periods. The human cost hidden behind efficiency metrics. Silence stretched as executives absorbed information they'd never been forced to confront collectively. Finally, Gregory Marsh, VP of Operations, spoke. These decisions follow established guidelines. We have legal approval for every termination shown here. Legal approval isn't the same as being right, Rachel said quietly. We operate a business, Gregory continued, voice hardening. Sometimes difficult decisions are necessary for the company's survival. I'm not arguing against difficult decisions, Rachel replied. I'm arguing for thoughtful ones, for asking whether we've exhausted alternatives, for treating people like they matter. Amanda Cross leaned forward. This all sounds very idealistic, but in practical terms, you're suggesting we slow down critical processes too. To remember we're dealing with human lives, Rachel finished. Yes, that's exactly what I'm suggesting. Michael, who'd been silent until now, spoke. Show them Tom Rivera's case. Rachel pulled up the file. 12 years of service. Exemplary reviews. Terminated for a single missed target during a documented system failure. Appeal denied, and she checked the timestamp, 9 minutes. The room shifted uncomfortably. Tom Rivera has 4 children, Michael added quietly. His wife is in cancer treatment. He was denied severance extension despite 12 years of perfect attendance. He looked around the table. This is what efficiency looks like when we forget humanity. Gregory tried again. With respect, we can't make business decisions based on personal circumstances. Why not? Michael's voice cut through the room like steel. Why can't we? Who decided that being profitable means being cruel? Part 2 is on the way.